Using Word effectively. Word 03, Table, View Gridlines.
When you're working with tables, it can be quite hard to see where the table borders come if you don't have actual borders switched on. There is, however, an option to switch on grid lines to give you some guidance, and that can be done when your cursor is in a table and you can see the table design and layout menus. If you go to the layout menu, there is an option to view grid lines. By switching on view grid lines, you'll get the dotted lines showing you where the rows and columns and the cell borders are, even without them actually printing. Okay, so those aren't proper borders, they will not print, but they're there as guidance, and they make it much easier to be able to adjust a column width or a row height, depending on what you're trying to do. You can make any changes much more easily if you can see the dotted lines. Or a row height if you want to do that. You can see it much more easily when you have the dotted lines to be able to see what you're doing. Once you've switched view grid lines on once, they will always come on. As I said, and I've got an example on the second page, if you have borders on your table, you don't necessarily need to worry so much because the borders make it obvious where the cell boundaries are. If, however, you were taking the borders off that table, If, however, you are taking the borders off that table by selecting the table and then switching the borders off, if you didn't have view grid lines switched on the layout tab, you wouldn't be able to see where the boundaries of the cell were. Equally, if you didn't have the show hide button, you'd probably be working in a much more difficult environment to be able to adjust column widths and row heights. It's very difficult to see where they are. So I strongly recommend that you use the layout tab, switch view grid lines on, and then even when you don't have borders on your table, you can see what you're doing.